At 29, Sarah Mitchell thought she had finally built the life she wanted: a successful career, financial independence, and the respect of her peers. But every family gathering brought the same humiliation: her mother's cruel comments about her age, her single status, and her failures as a daughter. What her family didn't know was that Sarah had been living under a different identity for years, building an empire they could never imagine. When her mother's mockery reached its breaking point at Thanksgiving dinner, Sarah decided it was time to reveal the truth that would silence her. Critics forever and show them exactly who they had been. Underestimating all along. Subscribe to our channel to never miss incredible stories of revenge, justice, and personal redemption. Every day, we publish new stories of people who transformed pain into triumph. Hit the notification bell. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and at 29 years old, I thought I had finally learned to armor myself against my mother's cruelty. I was wrong. The November air in suburban Chicago felt sharp against my face as I pulled into the familiar driveway of my childhood home. The two-story colonial house looked exactly as it always had: perfectly manicured lawn, seasonal decorations placed with mathematical precision, and an aura of judgment that seemed to emanate from every brick. I sat in my modest Honda Civic for a moment, steeling myself for what was to come. Through the living room window, I could see the warm glow of the family gathering already in progress. My younger sister Emma's laughter drifted through the glass, followed by the deeper tones of my brother-in-law Mark's voice. They had no idea what was about to unfold inside that house. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror one last time. My shoulder-length brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, my makeup minimal, my outfit unremarkable: a navy sweater and dark jeans. To anyone looking, I was exactly what my family believed me to be: average, unremarkable, a disappointment in designer clothing. The irony wasn't lost on me. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed the store-bought pie from the passenger seat, another small rebellion that would undoubtedly fuel my mother's commentary, and walked toward the front door. Before I could even knock, it swung open to reveal my mother, Patricia Mitchell, in all her perfectly coiffed glory. "Sarah, darling," she said, her smile tight and practiced. "You made it. I wasn't sure if you'd show up this time." Her eyes immediately scanned me from head to toe, cataloging every perceived flaw with the efficiency of a professional critic. "Oh, store-bought pie again? How practical of you." "Hello, Mom," I replied, forcing my own smile. "Happy Thanksgiving." She stepped aside to let me enter, and immediately the familiar sounds and smells of home washed over me. The scent of roasted turkey, the sound of football on television, the gentle hum of family conversation, all of it overlaid with an undercurrent of tension that had become as much a part of our family traditions as the wishbone breaking. "Sarah's here." Emma called out from the living room, and I heard the rustle of movement as the family prepared to greet me. My sister appeared in the hallway, radiant in the way that only a newly married 26-year-old can be. Her husband Mark close behind her. "Hey, sis," Emma said, giving me a genuine hug that momentarily warmed the cold knot in my stomach. "How was the drive from the city?" "Not too bad," I replied, genuinely happy to see her. Emma had always been the buffer between me and our mother's worst impulses, though even she couldn't always shield me from the verbal daggers. "Sarah, come sit down," Dad called from his recliner. "Game's just getting good." I made my way into the living room, settling onto the familiar plaid couch that had been the same since my childhood. Dad looked up from his newspaper with the distracted smile he'd perfected over years of avoiding family conflict. "So, how's work going, honey?" he asked, his question genuine but surface level. "It's going well," I answered honestly. "Really well, actually. I've been taking on some bigger projects lately." Mom's voice cut through the conversation like a blade. "Bigger projects," she repeated, settling into her chair with the authority of a queen taking her throne. "You mean those little graphic design jobs you do from your apartment?" "Sarah, sweetheart, when are you going to get a real career?" The room fell silent except for the television commentary. Emma shot me a sympathetic look, while Mark suddenly became very interested in his beer bottle. Dad rustled his newspaper more loudly, his universal signal for wanting to avoid confrontation. "I have a real career, Mom," I said quietly, feeling the familiar heat rise in my cheeks. "I've been telling you that for years." "Oh, darling," she laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "Playing with computers in your little apartment isn't a career. Look at Emma. She's married, settled, planning for children. That's success. That's what women your age should be focusing on. Emma shifted uncomfortably. Mom, maybe we could— No, let me finish, Mom continued, warming to her favorite topic. Sarah, you're 29 years old. 29? Do you understand what that means? Your biological clock is ticking away while you waste time on these silly hobbies. When I was your age, I already had both of you girls and was building a real life with your father. I felt my hands clench into fists in my lap. Times have changed, Mom. Women can what? She interrupted. Can pretend that career success matters more than family? Can delude themselves into thinking they have all the time in the world? Sarah, I love you, but someone needs to give you a reality check. You're getting older every day, and soon no decent man is going to want— Patricia, Dad's voice held a warning tone. But it was too quiet, too late. A woman pushing 30 with no real achievements to show for it. I see you in that tiny apartment, ordering takeout every night, working on whatever little projects you convince yourself are important. It's not a life, Sarah. It's an extended adolescence. The words hit me like physical blows, each one carefully aimed at the insecurities she'd been nurturing in me for years. But this time, something was different. This time, instead of the usual shame and hurt, I felt something else rising in my chest. A cold, clear anger. Emma was openly staring at Mom now. That's really harsh, Mom. Sarah's doing fine. Fine isn't good enough, Mom snapped. Fine doesn't give me grandchildren. Fine doesn't give her security. Fine doesn't what? I asked quietly, my voice cutting through her rant. Doesn't make you proud? Doesn't give you something to brag about at your bridge club? Doesn't fit the perfect picture you've painted of how your daughter's lives should look? Mom's eyes flashed. Don't you dare turn this around on me. I'm trying to help you, Sarah. I'm trying to save you from a lifetime of regret. I stood up slowly, feeling a strange sense of calm settle over me. For years, I had sat in this room and absorbed her criticism, her disappointment, her casual cruelty disguised as maternal concern. I had let her words reshape how I saw myself, had allowed her judgment to color every achievement and every setback. But today felt different. Today, the weight of the secret I'd been carrying felt less like a burden and more like a weapon. You want to know about regret, Mom? I asked, my voice steady. Let me tell you about regret. The room went completely silent. Even the television seemed muted against the sudden tension. For 5 years, I continued, I have sat in this room and listened to you tear apart my life, my choices, my worth as a human being. I've listened to you compare me to Emma, to your friends' daughters, to some impossible standard you've created in your mind. And I've let you do it because I thought maybe, somehow, if I just tried harder, achieved more, became someone different, you might finally see me as worthy of your respect. Mom's mouth opened, but I held up a hand. I'm not finished, I said, and something in my tone made her close it again. You want to talk about achievements? You want to discuss what women my age should have accomplished by now? Fine, let's have that conversation. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone, opening an app that few people had ever seen me use. My fingers moved across the screen with practiced ease, navigating to a profile that bore a name my family had never heard, SM Digital Solutions. You see this? I asked, turning the screen toward them. This is my little hobby. This is what I've been building while you've been telling me I'm wasting my life. Emma leaned forward, squinting at the screen. Sarah, what is this? I felt a smile tug at the corners of my mouth. Not the forced smile I usually wore in this house, but something genuine and fierce. This is my company, Emma. The company I built from nothing while living in that tiny apartment Mom loves to mock. The company that just signed a contract with 3 Fortune 500 companies. The company that grossed $2.3 million last year. The silence that followed was deafening. What do you think you would do in my position? After years of being dismissed and belittled, would you reveal everything at once, or would you let the truth unfold slowly? If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapters. But what happened next would change everything I thought I knew about my family and myself. Because my mother's reaction wasn't what I expected at all. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Mom's face had gone completely pale, her perfectly applied makeup suddenly looking like a mask against her shocked expression. Dad's newspaper had fallen forgotten into his lap, and Emma, Was staring at my phone screen as if it might disappear if she blinked. 2.3 million? Emma whispered. Sarah, is this real? I nodded, feeling years of suppressed truth finally breaking free. It's real. SM Digital Solutions. Sarah Mitchell Digital Solutions. I've been running it under initials to maintain some privacy, but it's been my full-time job for the past 5 years. Mark, who had been quiet throughout Mom's earlier tirade, leaned forward. Wait, SM Digital? I think I've heard of that company. Don't you guys do the marketing automation for several major retail chains? Yes, I confirmed. Along with web development, digital consulting, and custom software solutions. I have 12 full-time employees, and we're expanding into 2 new markets next quarter. Mom found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a croak. This is impossible. You live in that little apartment, you drive that old car, you buy store-bought pies. Because I choose to live modestly, I said, settling back onto the couch but keeping my posture straight, confident. Because I learned early that appearances don't define success, and because I've been reinvesting most of my profits back into the company. That little apartment you mock? I own the entire building. The old car I drive? It's paid off, reliable, and leaves me more money to invest in what actually matters. Emma shook her head in disbelief. Sarah, why didn't you tell us? Why have you been letting Mom say all those things if you're so successful? The question hit deeper than she probably intended. I looked around the room at these people I'd known my entire life, wondering how to explain 5 years of carefully constructed secrecy. Because I needed to know, I said finally. I needed to understand who you all really were when you thought I was nobody special. When you thought I was just the disappointing daughter who couldn't get her life together. Dad shifted in his chair, clearly uncomfortable. Sarah, that's not... We never thought you were nobody, didn't you? I asked, and my voice carried more hurt than I'd intended. Dad, when was the last time you asked about my work in any meaningful way? When was the last time any of you showed genuine interest in what I was building? But you never told us it was serious, Emma protested. You always said it was just some design work. Freelance stuff. Because every time I tried to share something I was excited about, Mom shut it down, I replied, my eyes moving to my mother, who still hadn't fully recovered from the shock. Remember 3 years ago when I mentioned landing a big contract? You said, that's nice, dear, but when are you going to find a real job? Remember last Christmas when I talked about expanding my team? You asked if I was finally ready to stop playing pretend and settle down. Mom's mouth opened and closed several times before she managed to speak. I thought I was helping. I thought I was encouraging you to want more for yourself. More? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Mom, I have more than you ever dreamed I could achieve. I have a company that's growing every quarter, employees who depend on me, clients who respect my expertise, and a financial security that most people my age could never imagine. But none of that mattered to you because it didn't fit the narrow definition of success you'd created for women. I pulled up another screen on my phone, showing a news article from a Chicago business journal. See this? This is from 6 months ago. Local entrepreneur SM Digital Solutions named Rising Star in Tech Innovation. That's me. Mom. That's your daughter who you think has no real achievements. Emma grabbed my phone, reading the article aloud. Sarah Mitchell, founder and CEO of SM Digital Solutions, has revolutionized how small and medium businesses approach digital transformation. Her innovative approach to, "Oh my God, Sarah, this is incredible!" Mark was shaking his head slowly. I can't believe this. All those times we talked about my job at the accounting firm, all those times I gave you advice about career advancement, you were running circles around all of us. The apartment, Dad said suddenly, his mind apparently catching up. You said you own the building? 3-unit building in Lincoln Park, I confirmed. Bought it 2 years ago. The rental income from the other 2 units covers all the expenses, and I live there essentially for free while building equity. It's actually a pretty smart investment strategy, though I realize it doesn't look as impressive as a suburban house. Mom finally seemed to find her footing again, though her voice was shaky. Why would you let me say all those horrible things if you knew they weren't true? I set my phone down and looked at her directly. Because they felt true, Mom. Because even though I knew my business was successful, even though I knew I was financially secure and professionally respected, your words still had power over me. Because part of me was still the little girl who just wanted her mother to be proud of her. The admission hung in the air between us, raw and honest, But mostly, I continued, because I needed to understand who my family really was. I needed to know if you loved me for who I am, or if you only valued me for what you thought I should become. Emma had tears in her eyes. Sarah, we love you no matter what. You have to know that. Do I? I asked softly. You're wonderful, and I know you care about me. But even you never really stood up to Mom when she was tearing me apart. Even you seemed to accept that I was the disappointment, the one who couldn't get it together. I thought, Emma started, then stopped. I guess I thought you were okay with it. You never seemed to fight back very hard. I was fighting back, I said. Just not here. I was fighting back by building something amazing while you all thought I was failing. I was fighting back by proving every single one of Mom's assumptions wrong, even if she didn't know it. Mom stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. She walked to the window overlooking the backyard where we'd played as children, her back rigid with tension. I don't understand, she said without turning around. If you're so successful, why don't you have a husband? Children? The things that really matter? The question landed like a slap, and I felt my newfound confidence waver for just a moment. But then I straightened my shoulders and remembered exactly who I'd become over the past 5 years. Because I've been focused on building something meaningful, I said. Because I've been creating jobs for other people, solving problems for businesses, contributing to my community in ways that matter to me. And because, Mom, those things aren't the only things that matter. They're not the only ways to measure a woman's worth. She turned back to face me, and I saw something in her expression I'd never seen before: uncertainty. For the first time in my life, my mother looked like she didn't know what to say to me. The truth is, I continued, standing up again, I have been dating. I've been in a serious relationship for 8 months with someone who respects my ambition, celebrates my success, and supports my goals. His name is David, he's a fellow entrepreneur, and I haven't brought him to family gatherings because I wasn't sure you deserved to meet him. Emma gasped. You have a boyfriend? Sarah, why didn't you say anything? Because every time I mentioned dating anyone, Mom immediately started planning our wedding, or asking when I'd be giving her grandchildren. Because I wanted to build a relationship without your judgment or expectations hanging over it. But here's what you're wondering, isn't it? What was my mother's response to discovering that everything she thought she knew about me was wrong? If you're enjoying this story, subscribe to the channel to follow the rest of this incredible journey. What happened next would challenge everything I thought I knew about why my mother had been so cruel, and it would change our relationship forever. The room fell into another heavy silence, but this time it felt different. The anger and defensiveness that had filled the air was slowly being replaced by something more complex, a mixture of shame, confusion, and what I could only describe as recognition. Mom returned to her chair, moving slowly like someone who had suddenly aged years in the span of minutes. When she finally looked at me, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Sarah, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you years ago. Dad shifted uncomfortably. Patricia, maybe this isn't the time. No, Harold, she interrupted, her tone firmer than I'd heard all day. It's exactly the time. She deserves to know why I've said the things I've said. Emma moved closer to Mark on the couch, as if sensing that whatever was coming would be significant. I remained standing, my arms crossed, still armored against whatever new revelation was about to unfold. When I was your age, Mom began, looking down at her hands. I had dreams too. I wanted to open my own interior design business. I had clients lined up, a business plan, even a small loan from my father. I was so excited, so sure that I could build something meaningful. This was not what I had expected. In all my years, I had never heard my mother talk about career ambitions, about dreams beyond the perfect domestic life she'd always seemed to embody. What happened? I asked, genuinely curious despite myself. Your father and I had just gotten married, she continued, glancing briefly at Dad. Society was different then. Family pressure was different. Everyone kept telling me that my little business idea was nice, but what I should really focus on was giving Harold children and being a proper wife. Dad's face had gone pale. Patricia, you don't need to. I do need to, she said firmly. Harold was supportive at first, but when I got pregnant with Emma, everyone convinced him. Convinced both of us that a mother shouldn't be gallivanting around with business ventures. That my responsibility was to my family, not to some silly creative pursuit. Emma looked shocked. Mom, I never knew you wanted to have a business. I gave it up, Mom said simply. I convinced myself it was the right thing to do, the mature thing. I threw myself into being the perfect wife and mother instead. But Sarah, every time I see you pursuing your own path, every time I see you putting career before conventional expectations, it reminds me of the dreams I gave up. And instead of being proud of you for having the courage I didn't have, I've been trying to make you as scared as I was. The admission hit me like a physical blow. I sank back onto the couch, trying to process this unexpected revelation. You've been tearing me down because you gave up your own dreams? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. I've been tearing you down because I was terrified you'd regret the choices I was too afraid to make, she replied, tears finally spilling over. I convinced myself that I was protecting you from disappointment, from the loneliness I assumed came with choosing ambition over family. But really, I was projecting my own fears, my own regrets onto you. Dad cleared his throat. Sarah, your mother never told me how much she resented giving up that business until about 5 years ago. When you moved to Chicago and started working for yourself, she became obsessed with the idea that you'd end up alone and unfulfilled. But you did end up alone. Mom burst out, then immediately looked stricken. I mean, you seemed alone. No husband, no children, working all the time in that small apartment. It looked exactly like what everyone had warned me my life would become if I'd chosen business over family. Except I wasn't alone, I said quietly. I was building something. I was creating a life that fulfilled me, that gave me purpose and pride. And now I have both professional success and a relationship with someone who supports my ambitions. I didn't have to choose between them. Mom buried her face in her hands. I know that now. Sitting here, learning about everything you've accomplished, seeing how confident and capable you've become, I realize I was wrong about everything. I was fighting battles that were mine, not yours. Emma reached over and took my hand. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I should have realized what was happening. I should have stood up for you more. We all should have, Dad added. I thought I was staying neutral, but really I was just enabling your mother's fears and your pain. I looked around the room at my family, really looked at them, and saw something I hadn't noticed before. They weren't the unshakable judges I'd built them up to be in my mind. They were flawed, complicated people dealing with their own insecurities and regrets. Mom, I said finally, what would you do differently? If you could go back knowing what you know now? She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. I would have found a way to pursue my dreams and have a family. I would have fought harder against the voices telling me I had to choose. And I would have celebrated your courage instead of fearing it. It's not too late, I said, surprising myself with the words. For us to have a different relationship, I mean, it's too late for you to restart that business, but it's not too late for you to support mine. It's not too late for you to be proud of who I've become instead of disappointed in who I'm not. Mark, who had been quietly observing this family revelation, spoke up. Sarah, would you be willing to tell us more about your company? I mean, really tell us? I'd love to understand what you've built. I felt a smile, a real one, cross my face. I'd like that. Actually, I'd love that. Over the next hour, I told them everything. I showed them my website, introduced them via video call to 2 of my employees who were working remotely, and explained the projects I was most proud of. Emma was fascinated by the creative aspects. Dad was impressed by the financial strategy. And even Mom asked intelligent questions about client relationships and business development. You know, Mom said as we finally sat down to our Thanksgiving dinner, now cold, but somehow more meaningful than any perfectly timed meal we'd shared. I kept telling you that you needed to find a real life, but you'd already built one. A better one than I ever imagined possible. Different, I corrected. Different from what you imagined, but not necessarily better or worse. Just mine. As we passed dishes around the table, the conversation flowed more naturally than it had in years. Emma asked about David and seemed genuinely excited to meet him. Dad wanted to know about my investment strategies. Mom tentatively asked if she could see the building I owned. Actually, I said, cutting into my turkey, I have something to propose. Mom, you mentioned that you had interior design experience. My building needs some updating, and I've been putting off renovating the common areas because I'm too busy with the business. Would you be interested in consulting on the project? Mom's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. You'd want my help? I'd want your expertise, I clarified. If you're interested. I'd pay you, of course. It would be a professional arrangement. Tears filled her eyes again, but this time they looked different. I would love that more than you know, Emma raised her glass of wine. I think we need a new kind of toast. Not the usual gratitude list, but something more honest. We all raised our glasses. To Sarah, Emma continued, for having the strength to build an amazing life despite our doubts and criticisms. To Mom, for having the courage to admit her mistakes and change. To family relationships that can evolve and grow, even when they seem broken. To second chances, Dad added. To the truth, Mom said, looking directly at me, even when it's uncomfortable. To choosing your own definition of success, I concluded, as we clinked glasses. I realized that this Thanksgiving had given me something I'd never expected to receive from my family. Not just acknowledgement of my achievements, but understanding of the journey that led me to them. The conversation continued late into the evening. We talked about everything, my business plans, Emma's hopes for starting a family, Dad's approaching retirement, and even Mom's long-buried creative aspirations. For the first time in years, I felt like I was talking to people who saw me clearly. When it came time to leave, Mom walked me to the door. Sarah, she said, her voice tentative. Would it be okay if I called you next week? Not to criticize or give advice, but just to talk? To get to know the woman you've become? I considered the question seriously. Trust, once broken, doesn't rebuild overnight. But looking at my mother's face, seeing genuine remorse and curiosity rather than judgment, I felt something inside me soften. I'd like that, I said. But Mom, it has to be different. No more comments about my age, my relationship status, or what you think I should be doing with my life. If we're going to rebuild this, it has to be based on who I actually am, not who you want me to become. She nodded eagerly. I understand. I want to learn about your world, your business, your real life, not the version I invented in my head. As I drove home that night, I reflected on how dramatically the day had unfolded. I had come to dinner prepared for the usual battle, armed with revelations designed to shock and silence my critics. Instead, I'd discovered that the person I'd been fighting wasn't really my mother at all, but her own unfulfilled dreams and regrets. The success of my business felt no less sweet, but the victory felt different now. It wasn't about proving my family wrong. It was about showing them, and myself, that there are many ways to build a meaningful life. 6 months later, Mom finished the renovation of my building. Her design work was brilliant, and she'd started taking on other commercial projects. Emma and Mark had become regular visitors to my office, often bringing lunch and staying to chat with my employees. Dad had even introduced me to a few potential clients through his retirement community connections. And David? He fit seamlessly into this new version of my family, bringing his own entrepreneurial perspectives to our dinner conversations, and treating my success as a point of pride rather than intimidation. What surprised me most was discovering that my mother's harsh criticism had been born not from disappointment in me, but from disappointment in herself. Her inability to pursue her own dreams had made her terrified of mine, and in trying to protect me from the loneliness she assumed came with ambition, she'd nearly driven me away entirely. The lesson I learned that Thanksgiving was that sometimes the people who hurt us most are fighting battles we know nothing about. That doesn't excuse the pain they cause, but understanding their motivations can be the first step toward healing. Today, when I look back on those years of enduring my mother's criticism while secretly building my empire, I realize that both experiences shaped me. The criticism taught me resilience and self-reliance, while the success taught me that external validation, even from family, isn't necessary for personal fulfillment. But having both, having achieved something I'm proud of, and having my family finally see and celebrate who I really am, that's better than any revenge I could have imagined. What would you have done in my situation? Have you ever had to prove your worth to family members who underestimated you? Share your stories in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this journey of family revelation and reconciliation, subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories of people who transformed criticism into triumph. Remember, your worth isn't determined by other people's understanding of your journey. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is succeed quietly, on your own terms, until you're ready to show the world exactly who you've become.